Listen. What do you hear? It's the city. Sounds of complex motion. Vibrations, piercing, annoying and distressing. A peaceful nap in New York City or Chicago is sometimes never experienced for the constant banging on the street below or the clanging of jackhammers pounding away at the once solid concrete. Sounds and images together soften the scene, but take out the pictures and the meaning of what you hear is different, disturbing, anxious. You await the return of the images to come back to your comfort zone. Why do sounds make us feel this way? Does our subconscious take note of what's wrong with what we hear? What's the motive behind these compound noises? Progress. It's how we get where we are today. Without it, life would not be easy. But does progress actually make it easy for us? Perhaps it's easy in the manner of daily routines and completing tasks such as calculating, flying, driving, and producing. Without progress, we would probably never prosper. Technology would suffer. Life would be complicated. Is this true? Would life actually be complicated without advancement? Or is it more true that with continued development toward the future, we're making daily tasks more complicated? Development, advancement, growth, and progress. These terms are commonplace in our world today. To move forward for the purpose of progress, we believe that these are vital. But the change we have implemented is a change that is detrimental to our existence and that of nature. On the nearby horizon lies the fact that what we do for purpose of progress shifts the balance toward benefiting us and leaving nature to figure out how to adapt to our needs. If human influence on the natural environment continues, our children will have no other reason but to rename the era the Anthropocene. Although we don't actually see them saying it, their words are a harsh and disturbing sound that reverberates within our minds.
With the rising sun in the east, humans begin their daily hustle and bustle tasks, rushing to work, completing reports, analyzing future profits, building for tomorrow. But what's behind this daily blur that darkens the future of our planet?
These images are humanity. We are these images. Future historians and anthropologists 1,000 years from now will easily identify these objects as humanity because they are the methods that modified Earth. Anthropogenic is a term that is creeping more and more in the news and academic journal articles. Students and people alike, when asked what this term means, answer with puzzled expressions. It refers to the influence that humans have on the natural world, influences that can have positive or negative effects.
Anything that's human influence would be anthropogenic. Anything that people, humans, touch that affect the world around us. An anthropogenic effect on the weather, anthropogenic effect on the land. So human-induced changes will be anthropogenic changes.
To understand the significance of our influence, explore the connections that are similar to a domino effect. As a family migrates into a virgin, natural landscape that will provide a perfect location for a home, they change the land by clearing trees and relocating soil to build. Just a few steps away, the land is turned into a garden to supply food for the new residents. Then, several people follow in to settle in the same area. When a series of dwellings are built, they require utilities to function and more land to grow food. Therefore, electricity and plumbing are installed and land turned into fields. To supply utilities for the growing neighborhood, power and water plants are constructed. When finished, the utility plants require more earthly resources to provide for the demand. Coal is chiseled out to fuel the furnaces that turn pumped water into steam to run the turbines to create electricity. Water for consumption is pumped in, purified, treated, and polished. Over time, the neighborhood expands into a city. More electricity and water is needed to supply the demand. Therefore, more land is acquired to supply the fuel needed to turn the turbines. More water is needed for steam and supply the growing city. Consequently, dams are constructed to increase the storage of water. Food is also required to supply the expanding city. Land is modified to make it more suitable for growing crops. As the city continues to expand, the land for growing crops dwindles. The result is to continue to modify the land for agriculture just outside the city. As the years turn into decades, the scenario is similar to playing leapfrog. Cities take the land to provide for the population, and farmers go beyond the city to provide the population food. Eventually, more power and water plants grow in numbers to support the developing city. Complicating matters, conveniences such as stores, markets, and outlets are built to provide the growing city with their necessities. This increases the rate of population growth and land required to sustain growth.
You may be wondering what's the problem with this if it demonstrates success and prosperity. You may be right. Nevertheless, the domino effect is complex. All that has been discussed is the modification of land to supply the demand of an expanding city. But consider the byproducts of this expansion.
At any time you convert land, soil, and you change it to concrete and asphalt, you're certainly changing the way the surface of the planet absorbs sunlight, or the albedo. When we begin to alter the amount of sunlight that's absorbed by the continents, and we do it with the oceans, but not as easily seen as on the continent. So if we expand into farmland, we're changing not only the albedo but evapotranspiration. We're changing that as well. And how far can we go with that? How far can we go eating up wonderfully productive farmland like we have in a good part of the United States, at least the Midwest, the breadbasket of the world? How far can we go and eating up acreage that we grow food with?
Every acre we expand takes away a piece of nature. It takes away the natural air, the virgin land, the natural habitats that wildlife needs to survive. It's an invasion on nature, uncontrolled, simply for the purpose of progress. But there are differences. The differences are based on location. Cities established hundreds of years ago tend not to expand outwardly due to their historical expansion into other cities or the limits forced by the landscape. Therefore, the continued expansion of these established cities is upward. Towering skyscrapers provide housing for residents and offices for businesses. But the cities that are not bound by natural limits continue to expand outwardly due to the vast resource just outside the city limits. In addition to the issue is the psychology of the human mind. Each of us has a certain buffer zone. Some zones of comfort are large and others small. Those who live in large cities around the world tend to have small buffer zones, which is evident by the way they reside in dwellings. People who have large buffer zones live in landscapes that are wide and open. Taiwan is an Asian island off the coast of China. The island is approximately the size of Indiana. 23.2 million people live on this island. It's crowded. Future outward expansion is not possible. So how do they house future generations? The answer is to build upward, which has been traditionally done in the past. The Taiwanese typically have a small buffer zone that allows them to tolerate the crowded population and build upward. Perhaps this is the answer for cities on vast amounts of land. Instead of expanding the city limits into the natural environment as well as decrease the agricultural lands, cities should begin building upward. The answer is simple, but the comfort zones of the residents are not that easy to shrink.
People enjoy their lawns and flower gardens. Suburbanites want to allow their dogs to run free in their backyards. Children play in sandboxes. Privacy fences are raised to keep neighbors from prying. How do we convince people to change? Do people realize what the future would be if we continue to expand unrestricted into nature's realm?
Seniors that are about to go into the world or go on to advanced degrees, we find that a substantial portion are not aware of things like the effects of global climate change. What do they do? So it's important that we do our job and sort of getting the word out. I think it's if one tunes in, one reads the newspaper and looks at the news and watches and listens, it's becoming pretty much aware. It's a story that's unfolding in front of us, and I think more and more are becoming aware. But still, we need to make that happen even more, because the more collectively we learn about the results of our development, the negative effects, maybe the faster we'll respond in trying to mitigate those effects.
When cities invade the agricultural lands, less food is produced to feed the people. When land for growing crops shrinks, farmers are forced to modify it to increase yields on a smaller plot. In order to increase the yields, they must use fertilizers. Fertilizers not only modify the immediate area, but also modify areas thousands of miles away. When a farmer applies fertilizer on his crops, it increases the abundance of food. When it rains, the fertilizer is eventually carried to a nearby stream. One stream dumps its water into a small river, which dumps into another river, which dumps into a larger river, until it ends up in the ocean. The southern coast of the United States along the Gulf of Mexico is considered the highest polluted water in the world due to agriculture. Nitrogen is the dominant chemical in fertilizers. When nitrogen ends up in the Gulf Coast area, the bacteria population increases. The effects cause fish and native water plants to die due to the lack of oxygen in the water. More importantly, the beaches where people swim for pleasure become vacant due to the fear of flourishing diseases. Farmers are not to blame. It's the population as a whole. Increased population centers demand more from smaller fields. Sure, there's plenty of land, but there's a risk that can affect the future, the degradation of the land.
There's a break point, and there's a break point as to how productive an acre can become. Can you get 500 bushels of corn out of an acre? I doubt it. I don't think so. Or soybeans. There's a point you say, well, how we can just be more productive with the acreage that we have, but there's a limit. And the more acreage that we convert to urbanization, to urban uses, the less we'll have to grow, and the more we change not only the albedo of our surfaces, but evapotranspiration as well, which affects the atmosphere.
Too much fertilizing, soil compaction, and overgrazing can have adverse effects for civilization. Fertilizing could possibly make the soil sterile. Crop yields would diminish, as would the food supply. Soil compaction creates a powder that limits water absorption. During heavy rain events, the water would run off, taking the important ingredient with it, topsoil. Increased runoff increases the risk of devastating floods. The demand to increase beef and pork production causes overgrazing that can result in desertification, a change in the land that limits its ability to repair itself. The atmosphere is another vital component in the function of the Earth's system. It's a filter from the powerful rays of the sun, a blanket that keeps us warm at night and cool during the day. It contains the important ingredients of life. It feeds the world. It refreshes us. Maybe we don't realize how important it is to us because we only acknowledge that it produces fascinating storms and picturesque sunsets and clouds. What's the motive behind these compound noises? Progress. It's how we get where we are today. Without it, life would not be easy. But does progress actually make it easy for us? Perhaps it's easy in the manner of daily routines and completing tasks such as calculating, flying, driving, and producing. Without progress, what do you hear? It's the city. Sounds of complex motion. Vibrations, piercing, annoying and distressing. A peaceful nap in New York City or Chicago is sometimes never experienced for the constant banging on the street below or the clanging of jackhammers pounding away. We would probably never prosper. Technology would suffer. Life would be complicated. Is this true? Would life actually be complicated without advancement? Or is it more true that with continued development toward the future, we're making daily tasks more complicated. Development, advancement, growth. Listen. At the once solid concrete. Sounds and images together soften the scene, but take out the pictures and the meaning of what you hear is different, disturbing, anxious. You await the return of the images to come back to your comfort zone. Why do sounds make us feel this way? Does our subconscious take note of what's wrong with what we hear?